Exotic armor can be one of the biggest staples to a build, taking multiple abilities and weapon types from, this is okay, to damn, what the hell loadout are you running? Worm God, Sunbracers, and Nighthawk are all classic examples of strong exotic armor done right. But as the game continues to evolve and introduce crazy high-level options like exotic class armor with double perk picking, a lot of old exotics have been left in the dust, getting power crept like you wouldn't believe. Today, we're going to go over the current weakest exotic armor pieces in PvE right now with the hope that maybe in the future they'll get some much needed love from Bungie. And to kick off our list, I can't think of a better contender than the Crest of Alpha Loopy. This one actually hurts me a little extra hard to bring up because it's one of Anno's favorites, but to be fair, she mostly wears it for the fashion, which admittedly is sick. Exotic perk, Survival Well, generate an additional orb of power from supers and a healing pulse when Barricade is activated. First things first, I can understand how back in OG Destiny 2, getting a single extra orb of power onto the battlefield was likely a fairly big deal. But Jesus, God, and elitist Datto on a foot-long hoagie. Generating orbs of power is now criminally easy to do. Between Reaper, heavy-handed, firepower, and Siphon mods, you can litter the battlefield with orbs in the neutral game with no problem. Now you might be thinking, oh, well, there's always the healing pulse, I guess. And you would be right. It heals around 80 HP and even gives some shield to any ally in line of sight, as long as they're within 12 meters. For comparison, that would be roughly half the range that Gemini Gestures can disorient at. I think that range is fine, but overall, it feels relatively lacking in the current meta, as healing options are now much more common compared to when Loopy first dropped into the game. Another factor is that in higher levels of content, barricades, to me, don't really feel as tanky or reliable enough to use as a hide behind and heal type ability. You could always put on the thruster ability for a short, fast, quick heal option, but again, I feel that if you want to lean into healing builds, you have a lot on the table right now that outshines Loopy. What I'd really love to see would be Bungie allowing this exotic to improve your barricade in other ways. Maybe make it tankier, or dare I say, maybe allow it to repeatedly heal pulse every few seconds in PvE, sorta like a weird cousin to the Warlock healing rift. By the way, I specify in PvE right there because I'll be the first to admit a constant heal pulsing Titan barricade sounds like a dream in PvE, but a nightmare in PvP. I don't really envy whoever at Bungie is in charge of making things fun and balanced, because that's gotta be a weird tightrope to walk when considering both PvE and PvP for all exotic usage. I'm not entirely sure how you'd spice up the orb generation factor, because again, as mentioned earlier, being able to generate a single extra orb of power is a borderline nothing level benefit to the exotic at this stage in the meta. Allowing Loopy to generate more orbs could lead to excessive super chaining, like back when you could do that with Golden Gun and the Star Eater scales before Bungie promptly shut that down. You could potentially upgrade that to generate an orb of power every time you cast Barricade. That would be very spicy, because it would then be basically a stronger, better version of the Reaper mod. Again though, that could have potentially dangerous ramifications in PvP, especially with the Radiant Orbs artifact mod currently in play. Then again, Acrobat Dodge kinda does that already for Hunters. Granted, it has a longer cooldown time to make up for the fact that you're giving your teammates free Radiant. Food for thought though. Coming up, we have another exotic that used to be such a terror in PvP that I'm genuinely glad it's on my list of forgotten exotics, because a part of me wants it to never come back. But before we get any further, let me tell you about Geology. They've partnered with me on today's video, so let's thank them real quick. Geology is the best in the skin and hair care game with 35 prestigious awards, including nods from Men's Health, Esquire, and more. Do you know for a fact you want to fight acne, reduce oiliness, or just up your skincare game in general, but you don't know where to start? Don't even worry about it. Just start with a 60-second quiz from Geology. Tell them about your skin goals, and they'll straight up develop a derm-grade personalized routine, then deliver it right to your door. It really is that easy. Mid-teens Fallout would have killed for this, by the way. Had a face like a freaking pepperoni pizza. Don't waste time sifting through endless products at the store just hoping you'll find something that works. Geology has distilled skincare to its essentials with trusted dermatologist-approved ingredients. What are you waiting for? Use my code Fallout70 and get 70% off your personalized skincare trial set. And remember, there's also 50% off and add-ons waiting for you. Again, hit up my link in the pinned comment and use code Fallout70. Thank you, Geology. All right, we back, and moving right along to an exotic I'm borderline glad is dead and collecting dust in my vault. Antus wards. Whenever you have full class ability energy, you can build up a unique slide that will create a shield in front of you. That shield reflects any projectile that comes your way and will cause said projectile to deal an extra 50% damage. However, it also consumes your entire class ability charge, meaning it's basically one time every 30-ish seconds depending on your overall loadout. The main appeal of this exotic in PvP is much less useful nowadays, since previously it would not consume your class ability charge, basically allowing you to run headlong around the map like a jackass and slide into every engagement with a free deflector shield. And even though you'd only end up reflecting 1 or 2 shots depending on what the other guy had, that would usually be enough to give you the edge to win the 1v1, which was really annoying. Now though, it requires having full ability charge, and on use it eats up that entire charge, making the exotic fairly mediocre. It should also go without saying that the ability to periodically deflect shots in PvE is relatively meh when compared to many other exotic options on the table. Don't get me wrong, it can get you some hilarious moments, and I will literally never not watch a clip of some Guardian in PvP getting cooked by their own super thanks to Antus. But for the most part, Antus is one of the more ignored exotics in the current meta. I gotta be really clear though, even though in this video and my other vid on underperforming weapons, I gave a few ideas on how to maybe improve underused exotics, I'm not sure I want to do that here with Antus. While it was fun trolling people with Antus, I'm sort of happy seeing these boots collecting dust on the shelf. It could be fun for them to get a buff, provided they don't come back at the same level of overall strength. Maybe if there was some kind of buff that made Antus fun, but not insane, such as a buff of some kind when you successfully deflect a projectile. Doesn't have to be wild, could be as simple as more mobility, recovery, or maybe even a weapon stat. Successfully deflect a shot and bump up your weapon handling and sprint speed through the roof for a couple of seconds. Now that might be fun. Anyway, as long as it's done carefully, I'd love to see a run through of buffing and tuning a lot of the older exotics we have, since nowadays the pool feels a bit one-sided, with a lot of the armor on the low end getting outclassed. And on that note, why don't we talk about Raiju's Harness. Exotic perk. When you're not attacking, Arc Staff drains slower, roughly 30% slower according to D2 Compendium, and you're able to end Arc Staff early. If you choose to end your super early, you'll blind any nearby enemies and gain a 4 times arc weapon surge lasting 20 seconds. Now those numbers aren't too bad, but why don't we look a little bit closer. An extra 30% lets your super last roughly another 6 to 7 seconds, which is fine, but this only applies when you're not attacking, meaning that if you choose to attack and use the super, you'll actually be getting much less of a benefit overall. But Raiden Flux, on the other hand, gives you a longer super duration for landing attacks, and on top of that, your super just does more damage as well. I know Raiju has the added benefit of giving you a surge after deactivation, but ×4 is only such a tiny smidge better than ×3, which literally any Guardian can run. What about part 2 of the exotic, the blind and weapon surge? Honestly, the blind is the only really unique part. It serves an okay purpose, letting you leave your super safely, and has a pretty decent radius. The weapon surges definitely can help, but it's situational and comes with hangups. For one, it would mean that you'd have to run Arc Staff for DPS, which is already fairly niche. But you then have to use your super just to get that surge, and that feels like too much. Here's a trick if you want a similar benefit. Use Gathering Storm and Foe Tracer, same level of surge on a much better DPS super. Also, you don't have to think about it as much. Step 1, throw staff. Step 2, profit. You could argue that Raiju's is maybe more viable in PvP, but I guess you could hot swap to it in 6v6, but that seems a bit unnecessary for quick play. In comp and trials though, you'd have to commit to that pick from the get-go because you can't swap armor in those game types. And considering the PvP armor competition for hunters right now, using an exotic that will only help you briefly once in the entire match is kinda wild. In terms of potentially getting buffed, what if Bungie tried leaning into the one unique element, the blinding factor? What if you could blind with Arc Staff hits when using the Force Palm attack, aka the light heavy combo, or when using heavy attacks in general? That would maybe give a nice new feel to the perk, and would actually be kinda useful in content like GMs, where blinding is uniquely useful. By the way, if you're just thinking to yourself, hey, this isn't fair, he hasn't talked about any Warlock exotics yet, all their stuff must be really perfect. Well, buddy boy, what if I told you there was, in fact, a Warlock exotic so underwhelming and forgotten, I almost always forget it's even a thing. Introducing the Skull of Dire Ahamkara, or as Cross might call it, the Skull of Hamkara. Now, Skull's exotic perk is fairly basic, which makes sense because it's a base game Red War exotic. Gain an insane amount of damage resist during your Nova Bomb casting animation and gives your super energy back on Nova Bomb kills. To repeat, on kills, not damage or hits like other super refund exotics in the same vein. The Shards of Galanor and Orpheus Rig both refund on hits, not kills, meaning you at least have the option to throw your super at a boss rather than just adds and still get the refund. But no, Ahamkara only gets the refund on kills. As a reminder, Nova Bomb just recently got a fairly nice damage buff, making it a respectable super to include in DPS. Why would I instead use that super for straight up ad clear? Anything that would get immediately crowd controlled by my Nova Bomb would also very likely just get mopped up by using my primary or special or general ability spam depending on my build. I think way back in the Reckoning activity, Skull of Dire Ahamkara was definitely a play, but I think back then it was stronger and refunded more energy before eventually getting nerfed. And again, that was one very particular ad dense activity where you had to move fast or potentially get knocked off a bridge. Right now though, most of the time you're using Nova Bomb, you're using it for DPS or just big damage on a big enemy. And if you're doing that, well, I mean, Prismatic Warlock gets access to Spirit of the Star Eater on their exotic class armor, so yeah. Even if you don't have the exotic class armor yet, which many players don't, you'd still be better off probably running Apotheosis Veils, that when you pop your super, you get actual benefits instead of needing to use it on ad clear. The damage resist factor is interesting, but practically a non-factor, seeing as it only works when you're in the actual animation of casting the Nova Bomb. It can come in the clutch for some rare life-saving moments, but also if you're a Warlock and running Nova Bomb, odds are you're also probably running Devour. And if you're then using Nova Bomb for ad clear, you will proc Devour on your Nova Bomb kill anyway. This exotic truly serves so little purpose that I genuinely can't vouch or even lightly recommend for you to use Skull of Dire Ahamkara in any activity unless you're using an exotic armor randomizer or you're just using it for the fashion. And I know nobody asked me at all, but hey, here's some ideas on how to tweak the skull. We could go the route of Orpheus Rig or Shards of Galanor and let it refund super energy in a way that isn't tied to kills. Maybe it could just straight buff Nova Bomb, let either the vortex effect last longer or make Nova Bomb generate even more seekers. Here's a wild idea, maybe Ahamkara gives Nova Bomb a straight raw damage buff depending on how far it's traveled before connecting with a target and give that a really high ceiling. That would encourage some real wild downtown trickshot Nova Bomb plays during DPS, and I like that idea. Either way, there has to be something Bungie can do with this exotic to let it actually be useful and not really feel like a neat paperweight sitting in my collections. Armor balancing can't be easy, but here's hoping that some of the older exotics get a bit of love, without breaking the game of course, so we can enjoy some of the classics a bit more frequently. If you have an exotic that you think should have made today's list, tell me all about it down in the comments section, as well as why you think it's bad or underused. As always, thanks very much for watching. Peace!